nice American lady. There we go. Yeah, and we're going to send you all the slides and anything else that we can think of that might be helpful afterwards as well. So take whatever notes are useful for yourself, but you are going to get anything that's on screen here, you're going to get later on. Okay, so let's kick off. So this is our kind of agenda. So we're going to do a general kind of overview of what Erasmus Plus is and what it's all about across different sectors. We're going to look at some of the priorities. We're going to look at what the objectives are and what it's all about. We'll go into some detail on kind of the activities that you can actually do as part of your project and how you might plan your project. And then we're going to look at the award criteria. So what it is that we're actually looking for when we're reading your application forms. We're then going to split into two groups. So we're going to open a breakout room for anybody that's involved in the vocational education and training, the VET sector, and the schools and adult education sectors are going to stay together. The reason for that is just that the application forms and the budgets are slightly different. So this is just to make things a little bit clearer for you. We are going to explain the sectors. So if you're not sure which sector or which room to be in, hopefully you'll have figured that out by the time we get down to that point in the agenda. So once you split into the two rooms, then we'll go through the actual application form. We'll have it up live on screen, what it looks like, what are all the questions. And we also have our finance team here to go through the budget and all of that kind of part of it. So hopefully by the end of today, you will be absolutely ready for October 4th for our next deadline that's coming up. That's the aim anyway. Please don't leave any questions unasked. We hope you won't go home today with something still bothering you. Do use the chat, do keep an eye on the questions other people are asking as well, because they might kind of inspire you a little bit or give you some thoughts or some ideas as you go along. So the budget overall for the Erasmus program, it's a fabulous big budget that has come down from the European Commission. We've got 26.2 million across from 2021 right to 2027. And all of us across all the sectors, we do have significant budgets that we're really excited to see all of you guys getting involved in these projects and you know, benefiting from this funding. You can see from our little chart there that actually the Commission is really putting a focus on these mobility projects. And this idea of people moving around Europe and learning from each other, that's something that they're really keen to see more and more of happening across all the different sectors, which is fabulous. And that's why you're all here today. And hopefully you'll all be able to put together amazing applications that you can benefit from this funding. So Erasmus Plus, what is it all about? I know people often hear Erasmus and they think of the third level, the colleges, they think of these Erasmus semesters abroad. But actually Erasmus Plus covers much broader than that. It also covers adult education, vocational education training, the youth sector, the school sector, and sport. And this is something we're quite excited to announce that as of January, we're going to be having sport projects in Lergus as well. We've never had that before. So we have some new colleagues currently being recruited, and we're really interested to see how that's all going to look come January. But this morning here, we have adult ed, vet, and schools all represented. So hopefully you're here from one of those sectors. If not, you might be a bit lost, but hopefully that makes sense. And yeah, so that's just a general sort of what is this all about. When the program was relaunched, so it came out again in 2021, they identified 4 key priorities across all of the program for all the sectors. So this is just something for any of you really to keep in mind. And this is something that should be kind of a thread throughout your projects when you're writing your applications and when you're planning your projects. So the 4 priorities, the first one is inclusion and diversity. This is really about including people from all kinds of walks of life, making sure that your project has built-in steps to being more inclusive and to ensure that people can participate fully in whatever way they need and using whatever supports they need. And our finance team later on are going to explain some of the actual financial inclusion supports that are built into the program to try and make sure that that is easy for people and that's doable for people. Another big part of it is the green priority. So, I mean, everywhere we turn right now, we're hearing about sustainability and the importance of all of this and the importance of minding our climate and our environment. So this is something, again, to just keep in mind, even if it's not the general theme of your project, but just to have it built in somewhere, to have those considerations about what do we need to include, what do we need to think about when we're planning our project, when we're traveling around Europe, what kind of considerations can we make to make this as green as possible, while also, of course, you know, benefiting from all the interactions that we're doing. Another priority is a digital priority. So this is looking at using digital tools in the best way. And I think the pandemic, for all the negatives of it, I think one positive that has come out is that we've probably gotten better. Even this seminar that we're doing here today, that we're able to do this online, I think is really important. So it's all about using those tools to the best of your ability to work with international partners, to have some maybe additional kind of virtual add-ons to your project. So as well as traveling abroad, you might also have some Zoom calls before or after to help you prepare, to help you debrief. There's loads of possibilities there. And the last one then is about active participation. So this is all about civic engagement. It's all about getting people involved as European citizens, getting them to have their voices heard, to participate in society. So again, it's just one of those things to kind of think about as you're planning your project. So where can you go? So this is always the exciting question. The program covers the 27 EU member states. Any of you that were up early this morning would have heard the European Union State of the Union address. It was very interesting to hear all that's going on across the Union. And then we have 6 additional countries that are on top of that. So that's North Macedonia, Serbia, Iceland, Liechtenstein, Norway, and Turkey. I know a lot of you in the past might have had really good partnerships with the UK, but unfortunately the UK is no longer an eligible venue. So it does need to be either one of the 27 or those 6 additional countries. But there's still a huge scope there in terms of where you can go and in terms of the opportunities. And we love to hear of people going new places they haven't been before. It's always great. So I'm not going to go into huge detail on the Erasmus objectives because they are different for each sector. And you'll all get sick of listening to me. But what I can say is that in general, they cover things about increasing the quality of teaching and learning. So that's what this is all about. This is not just about we're all going on a junket to Spain, which, let's enjoy the sangria and enjoy the sunshine while we're there. But it's, there has to be a purpose to it and there has to be an objective to it. So it's all about increasing that quality of teaching and learning. There's also pieces about strengthening the European dimension. So making us all feel more connected to our European neighbours and building a bit of solidarity across Europe. So I have mentioned here the programme guide. We're going to send you a link to download that at the end. I will give you a warning in advance that it's a beast of a document. It's 400 pages long, but I promise you do not have to read every single page. And so throughout this, we'll kind of tell you, here's the section to look at and here's the particular bit. So here I've given a specific only one page for each sector to read the objectives for your particular sector, just that you can be clear that your project is kind of meeting those objectives and is within what we're hoping to see coming out of these projects. But yeah, as I said, they're all just kind of in general about increasing that sort of quality piece in terms of what you're delivering, directly in your learning and teaching, but also in the management of the learning programs that you run, the curriculum development, all those kind of bits and pieces. So then a little bit about who is actually eligible to apply. So for the school education, that one is always the most clear, in my opinion anyway, because they literally have a list of who are the schools that it can apply. It generally covers pre-primary, primary and secondary level, but it also includes people who kind of have a role in managing and organizing school education. So that might be ETBs or it might be other kind of coordination bodies and things like that. And we do have a list on our website that actually specifies exactly what types of organizations in much more detail. So we'll send you the link to that. For adult education, so the adult ed one is a little bit more vague because we are basically anyone that's working kind of with adults in formal, informal and non-formal ways. It's always non-vocational when it's adult education, because I'll give you the definition for the vocational training in a minute. And again, it can be the people who are directly delivering that education, but it can also be organizations who are kind of coordinating or managing or supporting adult education to exist. Then the vocational one, this was a little bit broader again, but again, it's sort of that idea of the people who are directly delivering and also the people who are kind of supporting that wider network of VET. People do get a little bit caught up sometimes, because I know here in Ireland we have this concept of FET, as in further education and training, which kind of encompasses both the adult education and the vocational education. So in general, if it's vocational, if it's to do with the world of work and skills for work, that comes into the vocational sector, and kind of everything else comes into adult ed. So that could be your basic skills, your literacy, numeracy. It could be personal development, confidence building, hobbies and life skills. So there's a yeah, a little bit of everything else. But I think to remember that piece, that for the adult ed, it can include both formal, informal, and non-formal. So that's kind of where that gap is as well. So that's your eligible organizations. As I said, we have a page on our website that gives you way more detail. So if you're not sure if you're eligible to apply, we can go through that with you later on. Okay, so what can you actually do on these projects? Now, we had encouraged all of you to start your applications before you came on the call today, and hopefully some of you've done it. So this might not be very new for you, but let's just have a quick run through in case anyone's confused about anything. So the staff activities are the same for all the sectors. So you can do courses and training. That's where your staff actually go off on some kind of a structured training course or an event. They can go for between 2 and 30 days, but we can only support the course fees for up to 10 days of that. Then there's also job shadowing. So that's where they go and they shadow a peer or a similar colleague in another country, and they learn all about what they're doing and what their daily work is like. And they, are inspired from that organization about how they might do things differently. The teaching assignment is almost a kind of a step up from that again. So they're actually teaching in the partner organization in another country. So that's your staff activities. I don't see too many comments coming in the chat, so I'm just going to keep rocking on, but do keep throwing your questions into the chat if you have anything. My colleagues are all here ready and waiting to answer. So I hope I'm not going too fast or anything, but I'll take the lack of questions as being that people are following mostly. Here's hoping. Okay, so then we have the pupil and the learner activities. So these are slightly different sector to sector. So I'm going to call on Dee and Elva if I get anything wrong to interrupt me, because I work on adult ed, but I think I have it all right. So here's hoping. So for schools, the main difference with schools here is that you can do a group mobility where they travel as a group, or you can do an individual one. And then for the individuals, they can go for the short term or the long term. So that's your kind of main difference. And that's where people do get a little bit caught up sometime, where they get a little bit mixed up with that language that we use in terms of what is it, and is it an individual or is it a group one? So do just be careful and make sure that you're ticking the right box there. And if you do have any questions on that, give a shout out to Dee and to Dara that are here today. That will give you a bit of support on that. But the main difference is whether it's a group trip or whether it's an individual trip. And then for the individuals, how long are they going for? For the vocational sector, then there's a few more options as well. So they have one here for participation in skills competitions, which is a really interesting kind of a short term from 1 to 10 days that they can go off and take part in competitions. They also have this piece about the learning mobility. And again, it's short term and long term, but vet people would generally go as individuals. So you'll see it's 10 days up to 89, and then the longer version is the 90 days plus. So that's for the learners for the vocational sector. And then the adult ed sector, see, the adult ed one is much more straightforward. This is why I knew my one off by heart. So we just have either group or individual from 2 to 30 days. Now, I have got some inside info that we're going to have some more options as of 2023, but I won't confuse you with that for today. So at the moment, this is what we can do. They can either travel as a group or they can travel as individuals. And it's always up to 1 month for adult ed. So that's what they can actually do. Then we have some more kind of everything else, the other activities. And these are the ones that they go across all sectors. So there's some kind of interesting options here. There's one about invited experts. So that's really where you can have an international experience without leaving the house at all, that you can bring that international expert over to Ireland to maybe deliver a workshop or a training or something like that. We've seen interesting projects where people might go off to a training course, and then maybe a few months later, they might bring an invited expert back to run a workshop to see how have they embedded that learning into their project or something like that. So that's a really interesting one. You can also host teachers in training. So again, these are teachers that are coming from abroad to Ireland that you're hosting in your organization. In that case, they might also need to apply in their home country as well. So again, my finance colleagues can go through the details of this a bit more, but basically you would get some support for the hosting on this side, but they would need some support for the sending on their national side. And then preparatory visits, I think, is a really important one, and especially from that kind of inclusion perspective. So if any of you are sitting here going, Gemma, these are great ideas, fab, but I'm not taking 30 learners off traveling around Europe, without a bit of preparation. So the preparatory visits, they give you that opportunity to go over for a few days in advance and check it all out. Whether you want to meet with your host partners and tease through what you're going to be doing and plan the agenda, or maybe it's just as practical as figuring out how to get from the airport to the train station to the school, So you can do that as well. That's all part of it. We have put all of these onto one big slide, but I didn't want to put that one up first and give you a fright. But this is just if you're trying to compare, and I know some people that are here might be working across a few different sectors. There's one bit on that side actually that I had forgotten to mention, is that as well as having these physical mobilities, you can also do a virtual piece. So you might be going abroad for 1 week, but you might be adding on a preparatory visit with an online event before or after, and that can all build into that as well. Are we all following so far? I'm seeing a few more chat messages coming in, so that's good. Questions are always good. At least it means you're all listening. But do interrupt me if anyone's completely lost. So this is just an interesting one to think about. On my next slide, I was going to tell you the duration of the project, which is from 6 to 18 months. But the reason for that is that your project is more than just that 1 week or that 1 month when people are actually traveling and they're abroad. Your project is a kind of a bigger piece that sits within that. So it includes all of your planning, where you're figuring out, well, what are people going to do? What are they going to learn? What's the actual benefit of this? You're figuring out exactly who is going, all of that. The preparation piece, so that's you're selecting these participants, you're figuring out the practical stuff, the flights and the transport, the accommodation, and setting up agreements, any kind of maybe cultural preparation or language preparation that they need before they go to the country that they're going to, all of that kind of stuff. The implementation is the actual bit where people are abroad. And again, there might be some supports you might need to put in place there, whether it's that you're taking a group of pupils or learners and you've got a whole support structure and you've got staff traveling with them, or maybe it's just that one staff is going off on a training course, but she still needs to have a phone number of someone she can contact if she, Aer Lingus cancel all the flights again or something like this. So it's that kind of that piece that happens during the implementation. And then the follow-up is sort of how are you going to evaluate the learning? How are you going to make sure that there was actually some benefit out of this? How are you going to pull that benefit back into your organization so that you can, grow from it, and that it's not just the one person who traveled that benefits, but actually it's the whole organization that can grow and learn from that piece. So I think that piece is just really important to remember as you're writing your applications as well. You're not just writing about that 1 week when one person goes abroad. You're writing about the much bigger piece of all the planning and all the afterwards that goes into it, and the impacts that might have on other people who don't actually travel themselves, but maybe might still learn from those who did. So I think that's one to keep in mind. So then in terms of just some kind of practical, the facts and the figures and the bits and pieces, your project will last between 6 and 18 months. So that, depends on what it is that you're planning. If you're just planning one mobility, 6 months might be fine. If you're planning a few different training courses and a little bit of over and back and students going here and staff going there, you might need the full 18 months. So you define that when you're doing your application. The maximum number of people that can travel is 30. Now, that 30 does not include your preparatory visits. So they're separate in case you want to do those. And it also doesn't include accompanying persons. So this is if you had someone that needed people to travel with them to give them some support. So if you're sending a student group, you'd send accompanying persons that would be your teachers and your staff. But equally, you might just have an individual who might need a one-to-one, maybe a carer or a translator or something like that that would be traveling with them. So that's your accompanying person. So that doesn't count within the 30. So any of you that are sitting here feeling very ambitious for the next couple of years to come, do make sure that you keep it under that 30 limit when you're planning out all of your mobilities. Another just interesting piece to note is that you can only be successful once in every 1 year. So that doesn't really matter too much for this round. But if there's anyone here who did get a project under the first round, you can't apply again for the second one. If you were not successful, then it's absolutely fine. And we're delighted to have you back again. And I hope you've listened to all the feedback you got the first time around. But just to be aware of that, so you can only be successful once in each year. Another kind of a cap on that is that you can do 3 projects within 5 years, or you can have 3 grants awarded to you within 5 years. So again, if there's anyone here that has had a number of projects over the last few years, just to keep an eye on that, that you're not going over that maximum. Now, we're not going into any great detail on accreditation today, but just to be vaguely aware of it, that it is an opportunity for those who want to do more than this. If you want to do a lot of mobilities every single year, it is there. If you do a short-term project, you can later on apply for accreditation. That's absolutely fine. They're not, they're 2 separate things. But equally, if you're already accredited, then you cannot do a short-term project. So if there's anybody here that's already accredited, you might be in the wrong place. Do send us a message and we can have a chat with you about that. So yeah, we're not going into huge detail on that, but we can certainly chat to people about it again another day if that's something that you're looking at. Okay, how are we doing? I'll take a breather for 2 seconds. Anything mad coming up in the chat there? Are we okay?
I think we're good. Just let people know there is an accreditation application clinic this day next week for those interested in accreditation, the 21st. No, I think we've dealt with all the questions as they come along, Gemma. Thanks.
Okay, brilliant. Well, then my next little bit is looking at the actual award criteria. So this is what we're looking at when we're marking your application forms, and this is how they will be scored. And it's all very transparent, so there's no secrecy here. There's no kind of, you know, complicated thing. It's all very straightforward, but it's just important to keep all of this in mind. So we look at the relevance of your application. I'm going to go into the 3Ds in more detail now in a minute. That's 30 points. We look at the quality of the project design. That's 40 points. So again, that's a little bit higher. That's, you know, really something that we're focusing on. And then that piece about the follow-up. So again, it's the overall project. It's not just a little bit in the middle when you're actually traveling. It's the overall thing. And to be successful, you need to get at least 60 points, and you need to get at least half in each category. So if you manage to get 60 points, but you had only gotten 10 under relevance, then you wouldn't be successful. And so you do need to touch on all 3 of those headings. So let me go into a little bit more detail on them, and hopefully that will make sense. These are just things to keep in mind as you're working through your application and as you're reading back over it to make sure you've covered all of these. So in terms of relevance, we're looking at your relevance to the field. So that's whatever field you've applied under, whether it's adult ed, vet, or schools. So make sure that, you know, it's clear what the connection is. Are you working specifically in this field? Who are the learners that you're working with? What's the kind of cohort of people that you're working with? What's the type of work that you do? I would always say, you know, some of our evaluators are our own staff team here in Lagos, but some of them are international experts on various things. Presume that our evaluators know nothing about you. We can only score you on what's written on the form. So be really obvious, really spell it out in terms of, this is who we are, this is the kind of people we work with, this is the challenges they face. Really spell that out, because you can't just presume that we know, oh, there's Jim from South Hill, and sure, that's the type of people they work with. You know, sorry, Jim, picking on you. But you know what I mean? So you really spell it out, presume that we're not from Ireland at all, and we wouldn't have a clue what the challenges are in the sector. The next piece is relevance to those objectives. So as I said, there's objectives for each sector, and we have mentioned those earlier in the slide. So do look those up for your own sector, and make sure that you're connecting back to that and you're achieving something that the European Commission is hoping that you'll achieve out of the project. Then there's also some kind of specific priorities. So we really emphasize newcomers. So any of you there that are newcomers and are a bit nervous about all of this, we actually do want to have you on board. That's something we're looking for. We're always keen to have new organizations on board. We're also really keen to support participants with fewer opportunities. So my colleagues are going to go through that bit on the application form later on, but literally there is a box to tick to tell us, are you working with people with fewer opportunities? Tick that box, because, you know, it will also give us, you know, it gives us a kind of a perspective on the types of communities that you're working with, as well as giving you some extra funding in your project. So always let us know if that's a group that you're working with. And then there's some specific ones there for the vet and the schools in terms of supporting those long-term mobilities for the Erasmus Pro or the long-term pupils. So that's an interesting kind of one that's coming down from the Commission. They're really keen on seeing that long-term as well. So if that's something you're considering, it is something we're kind of looking for. If it's not, that's all right too. But just to let you know, it is something that we're kind of keeping an eye out for. So then in terms of the quality of project design, some of this stuff sounds really obvious, but I can tell you I've read applications and people just miss this completely. So you need to explain to us, so what are the needs of your staff? What are the needs of your learners? And the objectives of your project need to connect to those. So if you tell me, oh, here are all the challenges we have, but actually we're going to go do this other thing over here, and they're not connected, then that doesn't make sense. So there needs to be a kind of a link between, well, here are the needs we've identified, our staff need this development, our learners need these experiences. And so here's the objectives of our project, and they're going to talk to each other. And the next step of that is your activities. Your activities are going to help you to meet those objectives, so you're going to meet those needs. So again, spell it out, make it really clear. This is how these are all connected, and this is how, you know, 3 people going to France for a week is actually going to help us to meet these really basic needs of our learners. Make that connection for us and write it out so that we can really understand it. Also, just that your plan of action is clear, that we can understand it, that we can kind of figure out, oh yeah, okay, well, they're going there in March and they're going there in June, and these guys are going to Spain and those guys are going to France, and that's why this is all connected. So we look at a lot of these application forms, so just make sure that it's all really clear for us. Also have a think about that environmental piece. So how can you build that in somewhere? You are going to be asked about that, so make sure you've kind of made some mention to that as well, that you've thought about it. And then using some of the digital tools. So if these are brand new to you, I have a slide on them at the end with the links and things. ePale is the electronic platform for adult learning in Europe. eTwinning is another platform that's used for schools mostly, but also a little bit for vet. So these are kind of online platforms that can help you to find partners, to find courses, to get inspiration for your projects. So, you know, have a think about, are you going to use those? But also things like, are you going to have, you know, use digital tools to share things with the partners that are going to be hosting you, to work with the participants that are traveling, all of that. So how are you using those digital tools? And then the last piece is the follow-up. So as I said, your project doesn't end the second everyone flies home and gets back to their own house. There needs to be another kind of a little bit deeper than that. So part of this quality is looking at the kind of task and responsibility. So who's taking charge of all this? Who's managing the project? There's also a piece about the Erasmus quality standards, and we can send you on the link for those. It's kind of all stuff that we're mentioning within today's presentation anyway, but just that you're managing the project in a fair and transparent way, that everyone is benefiting and everyone is supported throughout their mobilities. A big piece of this is integrating the results of your project into your organization. So ensuring that this isn't a standalone, that whatever you've learned and whatever those few people that have traveled have learned gets embedded into the organization in some way, and the whole organization benefits from it. So have a think about that. We also ask about evaluating. So how are you going to find out what people learned? How are you going to measure that? What's your process for that? And then about sharing the results of your project. So it's all about spreading the word. Are you going to, both within your own organization and with externally, how are you going to talk about the project? How are you going to promote what you did? You know, what kind of maybe online tools or media tools or different things that you might use to spread that word. And then also acknowledgement of the European Union funding. So that is a requirement. If you are successful, it comes in under your contract. But just to have thought of that from the very beginning and thought of, oh, maybe we might do this blog or this publication or this social media campaign or whatever it is, have those all built in. So that's the kind of the scoring, the criteria that we're actually looking for. I hope that makes sense. And as I said, it's super transparent. There's no tricks here. There's nothing hidden here. We really want you to succeed. We want you to meet all these criteria and to score well. If anyone is still a little bit lost or still looking for some further inspiration, here's a few other little bits that might help. So as I said, these are these online tools. ePale is the adult learning one. Now my school colleagues can help me out here with the education one. So eTwinning and the School Education Gateway are kind of going through a process at the moment where there's going to be a new platform coming up. But for now, those links will work for you, and they're still there. But there might be a new name coming in for this in the next little while. But for now, those links will work. And again, they're just places that you can see what other people are doing. You can get some inspiration. You might be able to meet some international contacts that might partner with you, that might host you, that might be running a training course you could go to, all those kind of things. So do have a look on those platforms.
But if you don't mind, if I just add as well, for vet, you can use eTwinning for vet. In the past, ePale would have been used, but really it's eTwinning now. And there's some good stuff there if you're looking from the vet side as well.
Brilliant, thank you. Another really interesting place is the project results platform. So any successor project anywhere in Europe automatically gets the summary of their project uploaded onto the Erasmus Plus project results platform. So you can go on there and you can see every project that has been successful in recent years. You can filter by topics and themes. So you could say, if you want a schools project on environment, you could filter for that and you could see all the ones that have happened. And it might just give you some inspiration or whatever your different topic is. We also have a blog on our website. For anyone here that's adult ed, I've done a blog lately about adult learner mobilities and how to take learners abroad. I know the school sector did a fabulous one lately as well for newcomers. So there's always new stuff coming up there on our blogs. And we do also encourage anyone who has active projects to write blogs and tell us how they're getting on. So there's lots there. And then our website in general also has lots of kind of step-by-step, and here's additional bits and pieces. I know there's a fabulous jargon buster that goes through all this European Commission language and translates it a bit for you. So there's things like that on our website as well. And then my last few bits to mention is just, and this is more for when you get these slides later on, that you can see all these bits of information, you can click the links. The application forms are all up and live. I hope most of you have already given them a start. Make sure you're doing the right one, make sure you're doing the right sector. So we do have the 3 different sectors. They're all KA122 is a short-term project. And then you have either the schools, the adult ed, or the vet. Even a step before that is that you need an organizational ID. So if anyone doesn't have that just yet, again, we have the link here that will help you figure out how to apply, or how to check if maybe you do already have one from a few years ago that you've forgotten about, if staff have changed or whatever. Just a little practical bit on the application form is that you don't need to be listing out your individual participants at this point. You need to give us a gist of the types of participants, whether they're your staff or your learners, what kind of people those might be and why they might benefit from the mobility, but you don't need to list the names. And then in terms of the organizations that you're going to be working with, you do need to have at least one listed. That can change a little bit as time goes on if it comes to it. But the other thing is they don't necessarily have to have an OID. So if you're working with someone who's never been involved in Erasmus Plus before, that's okay. You can just put down the name of the organization in the country. Most important thing is the application deadline is the 4th of October. It's at 11 o'clock, which is 12 o'clock in Brussels. Do not wait until the 4th of October. Please don't wait until the 4th of October. The system does sometimes crash on the morning of the deadline. I would say have it in a day or two before, if at all possible. You can always go back and you can read over it again, and you can hit submit again if you really want to. And the one we accept is the last one that was submitted. So if you change something and you hit submit again, we get the final version. But yeah, don't wait until 10:30, please, just in case. We do have all kind of policies and procedures in place for if there's a technical error at the last minute, but it's easier to just get it in a day or two before and avoid that altogether. And then the last bit to say there is that your project can start. So you'd be applying on the 4th of October. You'll hopefully hear from us sometime in the middle of December about if you've been successful. And then your project could potentially be starting sometime between January and May. So that's the kind of timeline to keep in mind. And then I have put up all of our various email addresses from all the team here. So you'll have all of those when you get these slides later on. So that is kind of me for now. And I hope that was clear. And I hope that covered most of the questions that you have. Yeah, shall we just pause there for 1 second? Is there anything else just for my colleagues that we need to mention or that I haven't covered?
No, I think we've addressed all the questions, a lot about e-twinning, a lot about partners, the PIC. Just be clear, that it was called the PIC. It's now the OID. So if you had a PIC, it automatically is transferred to the OID. Once you have an OID, you do not need to apply for another one. Just some general questions. I think we've addressed them all. Just about if you have a partner, is it good to mention? Absolutely, because when we go to the application form, you'll see you have to have at least one partner. But absolutely, if you do have a working relationship with a partner, these are kind of all very school-specific questions. Yes, do mention your partner. And also, if you do have a partner and you plan to be a reciprocal project, particularly the schools wanting to go bring pupils and hopefully you'll be rehosting those pupils, do mention that it is a reciprocal project. I think that's mainly it, to be honest with you guys.
Jay, there's one question there.
Yeah.
Can the hosting organisation be the European Parliament?
It would have to be very clearly why you want as a European, the hosting organisation be the European Parliament, to be perfectly honest. Usually a hosting organisation for schools, to be very clear, is usually a hosting school or a course provider. So you'd have to be very clear in your aims and objectives as to why that is your host partner. That doesn't say you cannot go and visit them. So you'd have to be very clear about that reason, the rationale for that.
And I can say on the vet side, it wouldn't be allowed because it's supposed to be a host, a work, yeah, no, just no for the vet, possibly for the schools, yeah.
Yeah, you can visit as part of a project, absolutely, yeah. A question here, do you have to have a partner for applying? Yes, you do. So you have to have at least, when Dara goes through the application for schools and on the vet side, you'll see you have to be able to at least list one partner, be it a training provider or a host provider. So you have to have at least one partner for the application form. And we haven't started our application form. Yes, it is realistic to get in by the 4th of October if you have an idea of what you want to do. These are short-term projects. Do we need to have a budget worked out when filling the application form? I'm going to leave that to Norma Jean, who'll be going through it shortly.
So just to explain again, because I know a few of you came in a bit late, we're actually going to have a second part of the presentation now in a minute. We're going to split into 2 rooms and we're going to go through a bit more detail on the actual application form and the finance bits. So yeah, just in case anyone came in late and missed that piece of message.
Sorry, just the last question there for Karen. Yeah. You're planning a joint mobility with 2 Irish schools, 30 pupils from each come together from one town. Yes, they are separate applications. Absolutely. Yeah. So definitely. They are 2 separate applications. Yes, they are, Karen. So each school needs to apply for the project and each school is awarded it. Each school is assessed individually.
Yeah, they're standalone applications.
Can I just actually add there as well for the schools? Some of the schools might be familiar with the old KA229 partnerships. What has slightly changed now with the KA1, yes, you can apply for a group mobility of pupils, say to go to France or another EU country. But if you want to have a reciprocal visit, that French school would then need to apply separately to their own French national agency, for example, to come over here. So the old KA229s used to allow for the reciprocal visits, but now this is only for the Irish partner schools that are sending their participants to another country.
Correct, and there is an option, somebody asked me there, you could apply for a small scale partnership that I did answer in a question there if you so wished, and there's an application clinic this afternoon for that, if those are interested in looking at that way of doing it. But Norma Jean is correct in what she said there. If I'm correct, I think, Gemma, we're good to go.
Yeah, I think so. So our plan is, I'm doing the breakout room, am I? So I'm creating one here. So this is going to be for anyone that's working in the VET sector, the Vocational Education and Training sector. And it's going to pop up here now that anyone that wants to can move into it. I'm trying to.
While Gemma's doing that, I might just clarify, if you're level 4, 5, 6, generally level 5 and 6, leading to a specific vocational career, that would be VET, just in case there's any confusion. Some of you might be able to apply for all 3, but it just depends on what you want to do. So we'd kind of start with the learners and then determine from there. So if you're dealing with secondary school students, it'll be second level, it'll be schools. Adult education, Gemma went through that. And then if it's kind of looking at the vocational learning aspect, then it'll be under the VET sector. But if there's any confusion, maybe you might want to ask and then we can clarify it out a little bit. The principles are the same for each of the applications. It's just the nuances are slightly different. So it's valuable to go to any of them. But obviously, if you can get to the sector specific one, then do. And we can have follow-up phone calls and conversations afterwards. That's no problem.
So I'm just going to open one breakout room here. I'm hoping it's not going to send everyone off to it. I think I have the settings done right. If it does, I'm very sorry. So the idea would be that if you are for VET, you go into that breakout room. If you're adult ed or schools, you stay here. If you cannot figure how to move, give us a message or come on the mic and we'll move you over automatically. So yeah, schools and adult ed, stay where you are. VET people, please click on this link here and move out into the VET room. Hopefully that's working for everyone, and see you all later, VET people.